In October 2017, a shocking story emerged that would spark nationwide outrage and expose the harsh realities of immigration enforcement under the Trump administration. The case involved Rosa Maria Hernandez, a 10-year-old girl with cerebral palsy who was detained by federal agents while seeking life-saving medical treatment. But as recent social media posts have resurfaced this story, claiming it was ICE agents who detained her, we need to separate fact from fiction and understand what really happened. The truth is both simpler and more complex than the viral claims suggest. While the detention did occur exactly as described, it wasn't ICE agents who detained Rosa Maria, it was U.S. Customs and Border Protection officers. This distinction matters, especially when examining the policies and procedures that allowed this disturbing incident to unfold. To understand how a sick child ended up in federal detention, we need to go back to the beginning of Rosa Maria's story. Born in Mexico, Rosa Maria was brought to the United States when she was just 3 months old. Her parents made the difficult decision to cross the border illegally, driven by a parent's desperate need to secure better medical care for their daughter's cerebral palsy. They settled in Laredo, Texas, where Rosa Maria would spend the next decade of her life. The cerebral palsy significantly affected Rosa Maria's development. Despite being 10 years old chronologically, her cognitive abilities were closer to those of a 4 or 5-year-old child. She required constant medical attention and specialized care that her family believed was more accessible in the United States than in their native Mexico. For years, they lived quietly in Laredo, with Rosa Maria attending elementary school and receiving the medical treatment she needed through Medicaid. Then came the night that changed everything. In the early morning hours of October 24, 2017, Rosa Maria experienced severe complications that required emergency gallbladder surgery. The local hospital in Laredo determined that she needed specialized care at Driscoll Children's Hospital in Corpus Christi, about 150 miles away. This presented an immediate problem for the family. Between Laredo and Corpus Christi lies an inland border patrol checkpoint, one of many such checkpoints scattered throughout South Texas, designed to catch people who have entered the country illegally. Rosa Maria's parents, who were also undocumented, faced an impossible choice. Their daughter needed life-saving surgery, but accompanying her would mean almost certain detention at the checkpoint. In a heart-wrenching decision that no parent should have to make, Rosa Maria's mother, Felipa de la Cruz, chose not to accompany her daughter. Instead, she signed notarized documents authorizing her 34-year-old cousin, Aurora Cantu, a U.S. citizen, to travel with Rosa Maria in the ambulance. The family hoped that having a legal guardian present would allow them to pass through the checkpoint without incident. It was around 2 a.m. when the ambulance carrying Rosa Maria and her cousin approached the Border Patrol checkpoint near Freer, Texas. What happened next would become the subject of intense national debate. Border Patrol agents stopped the vehicle and questioned the occupants. Cantu was transparent about the situation, even providing agents with a letter explaining that Rosa Maria was undocumented and needed to be transported for emergency surgery. After a 30-minute delay that must have felt like an eternity to a family dealing with a medical emergency, the agents made their decision. They would allow the ambulance to proceed to the hospital, but they would follow it. This meant that Rosa Maria would undergo her surgery under the watch of federal immigration officers. The scene at Driscoll Children's Hospital was surreal and disturbing. As Rosa Maria was prepared for surgery, Border Patrol agents positioned themselves outside her hospital room. According to the family's attorney, Leticia Gonzalez, the agents initially insisted that the door to Rosa Maria's hospital room remain open at all times so they could keep an eye on her. Think about that for a moment. A 10-year-old child with the cognitive abilities of a preschooler recovering from surgery under constant surveillance by armed federal agents. The surgery itself was successful, but Rosa Maria's ordeal was far from over. When doctors recommended that she be discharged to a family member familiar with her medical and psychological needs, Border Patrol agents had other plans. Despite the medical recommendation and the presence of her cousin, a U.S. citizen who had been authorized by Rosa Maria's parents to care for her, the agents refused to release the child. Instead, Rosa Maria was transported more than 150 miles away to a federally funded shelter in San Antonio that housed unaccompanied immigrant minors. The facility, run by the Department of Health and Human Services Office of Refugee Resettlement, was not equipped to handle Rosa Maria's specific medical needs. Staff members, while well-intentioned, did not have access to her medical records or discharge papers from the hospital. The legal justification for Rosa Maria's detention centered around her classification as an unaccompanied alien child. Under federal law, children who enter the United States without proper documentation and without a parent or legal guardian are considered unaccompanied minors, regardless of whether they have family members in the country. Border Patrol agents argued they had no choice but to detain Rosa Maria because she wasn't with her parents. This interpretation of the law struck many as both legally questionable and morally reprehensible. Rosa Maria wasn't an unaccompanied minor in the traditional sense. She had parents in Laredo and was traveling with an authorized adult guardian. She wasn't attempting to cross the border. She was seeking medical treatment. The American Civil Liberties Union argued that federal officials were not legally obligated to take Rosa Maria into custody because she had parents in the United States. The case became even more complex when agents offered Rosa Maria's cousin a choice: sign papers for the child's voluntary departure back to Mexico, where she could be transferred to a hospital, or face up to 3 weeks in detention followed by deportation proceedings. The family refused to sign the voluntary departure papers, knowing that Rosa Maria needed the specialized care available in the United States. As news of Rosa Maria's detention spread, it sparked outrage across the political spectrum. Representative Joaquin Castro, a Texas Democrat, called the situation unconscionable and argued that the child posed no threat to national security. Immigration advocates pointed out that the case highlighted the cruel realities of current immigration policies where even sick children weren't safe from enforcement actions. The timing of Rosa Maria's case was particularly significant because it occurred during the early months of the Trump administration, which had implemented more aggressive immigration enforcement policies.
Amid the intensifying U.S. immigration crackdown, ICE announced it arrested 65 illegal immigrants in Connecticut during a 4-day sting called Operation Broken Trust, as part of its wider crackdown on sanctuary states. The arrests came just months after Connecticut expanded its sanctuary state law known as the Trust Act, blocking local police from sharing information with ICE unless required by law or in cases involving serious crimes. According to ICE, the operation specifically targeted violent criminals, gang members, and repeat offenders with long criminal records. Of the 65 taken into custody, 29 had been convicted or charged with serious crimes like kidnapping, drugs, weapons, and sex offenses. Officials revealed that some were also identified as members of violent transnational gangs or had foreign criminal histories. ICE Boston's acting field director Patricia Hyde warned that sanctuary laws only protect criminals while putting communities at risk. She said the Trust Act forces local authorities to release dangerous offenders back into the same neighborhoods they harmed. Hyde called the operation a success, stating that Connecticut is safer thanks to the teamwork of ICE and its federal partners. She stressed every person arrested had violated federal law, with many also tied to gangs, drugs, or violent assaults. The 4-day sting involved ICE, the FBI, U.S. Marshals, DEA, and ATF working together to locate and capture offenders. All 65 migrants remain in ICE custody as they await immigration court proceedings or deportation back to their countries.
However, it's important to note that similar cases had occurred under previous administrations as well. What made Rosa Maria's case stand out was the combination of her age, her disability, and the circumstances that led to her detention. These enforcement operations weren't isolated incidents. Across the country, federal agents were conducting widespread raids targeting individuals with serious criminal histories.
ICE say it started last Tuesday and went through last Friday, and they took some of the worst offenders off our streets. Chief Investigator Len Bestoff joins us with more.
Many of the people arrested are from Danbury, Norwalk, and Stamford. ICE said of those arrested, 29 had been convicted or charged in the U.S. with crimes including kidnapping, assault, drug offenses, weapons violations, and sex crimes. Others were identified as gang members or had criminal histories in their native countries. Senator Richard Blumenthal told us he still has questions about how this was carried out, with concerns mistakes could have been made.
People who violate criminal laws and are here illegally ought to be deported, but I think that these arrests have to be scrutinized closely in the courts.
Now, ICE says everybody who was arrested did have a criminal history. This operation was carried out with officers from ICE Boston's Hartford field office and multiple other federal agencies. The fact that the feds got basically no help from Connecticut law enforcement appears to remain a sticking point with the feds. Len Bestoff, NBC Connecticut.
Now, Connecticut leader in the Senate, the Republican Stephen Harding, released a statement that reads in part, the federal government clearly has taken note of Connecticut's super sanctuary policies, even though Governor Lamont and state Dems really don't want the term sanctuary state applied to our state. In Danbury tonight, people gathered for an anti-ICE protest. It comes after two men were arrested outside the courthouse there last week. A crowd of about 100 stood with signs and umbrellas in the rain, chanting and listening to messages of resistance.
The operations focused on removing violent offenders, gang members, and repeat criminals from communities, with officials emphasizing public safety as their primary concern. Yet the broad scope of these enforcement actions often caught vulnerable individuals like Rosa Maria in their net. The sensitive locations policy that was in place at the time theoretically protected certain areas from immigration enforcement actions. Hospitals, schools, and churches were supposed to be off limits except in cases of serious public safety threats. However, Border Patrol argued that Rosa Maria was actually detained at the checkpoint, not at the hospital, which technically didn't violate the sensitive locations policy. This distinction reveals the limitations of such policies when they're applied rigidly without consideration for humanitarian circumstances. While agents may have followed the letter of the law, many argued they violated its spirit by pursuing a sick child to a hospital and detaining her immediately after surgery. The psychological impact on Rosa Maria and her family was severe. This was the first time in her life that she had been separated from her family, and her developmental disabilities made it even more difficult for her to understand what was happening. According to activists who visited her at the shelter, Rosa Maria began showing signs of social withdrawal and refused to eat her favorite foods, clear indicators of the trauma she was experiencing. Meanwhile, her mother, Felipa Dia La Cruz, was devastated. In interviews with reporters, she spoke through tears about the pain of being separated from her daughter during such a vulnerable time. "It's painful for me to know that my daughter is there, and I can't help her," she said. "I would like to have her near me so I could be the one who is helping her and supporting her right now when she needs me the most." The case gained national attention, with news outlets across the country covering the story. The New York Times, NPR, The Washington Post, and other major publications reported on Rosa Maria's situation, bringing scrutiny to the Border Patrol's actions. Social media campaigns using hashtags like #MourFreeRosa emerged, with activists demanding her immediate release. The American Civil Liberties Union filed a lawsuit in Rosa Maria's behalf, arguing that her detention violated federal law governing unaccompanied minors and inflicted serious psychological and emotional injury on her and her family. The lawsuit sought her immediate release and reunification with her parents. After 11 days of separation from her family, days that must have felt like an eternity to a confused and frightened child, federal officials finally released Rosa Maria on November 3, 2017. The announcement came suddenly, with officials providing little explanation for the change in position. Rosa Maria was transported from the San Antonio shelter back to her family's home in Laredo. The relief was overwhelming for everyone involved. Michael Ton, the ACLU attorney who represented Rosa Maria, told reporters, "We're just thrilled. It's such a relief. It's actually quite overwhelming." This was the first time in her life she was separated from her family. Representative Castro, who had been advocating for Rosa Maria's release, tweeted a photo of the family's reunion with the caption, "Finally, Rosa Maria is back with her family where she belongs." However, Rosa Maria's release didn't end her legal troubles. She had been served with a notice that she could face deportation, and immigration proceedings against her continued. The case highlighted the broader challenges facing families in similar situations, even when detained individuals are released. they often remain in legal limbo for years. The Rosa Maria Hernandez case became a symbol of the harsh realities of immigration enforcement in the United States. It demonstrated how policies designed to secure borders can have devastating effects on vulnerable individuals, particularly children with disabilities who require specialized care. The case also revealed the limitations of existing protections, such as the sensitive locations policy, when applied without humanitarian considerations. Fast forward to 2025, and Rosa Maria's case has taken on new relevance. Recent social media posts have resurfaced her story, but with a crucial error, claiming that ICE agents were responsible for her detention. This mistake matters because it speaks to the broader confusion about which federal agencies are responsible for different aspects of immigration enforcement. The distinction between ICE and Border Patrol is important for understanding how immigration enforcement works. IC, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, is primarily responsible for interior enforcement, including deportations and detention of individuals already in the country. Border Patrol, which is part of Customs and Border Protection, focuses on securing the borders and operates the checkpoints where Rosa Maria was initially detained. The recent resurgence of Rosa Maria's story on social media has coincided with significant changes in immigration policy. In January 2025, the Trump administration, now in its second term, fully revoked the sensitive locations policy that had theoretically protected places like hospitals, schools, and churches from immigration enforcement actions. This policy change means that cases like Rosa Maria's could become even more common. The administration has also announced ambitious plans to handle the massive scale of deportations being planned.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem is reportedly pushing for immigration and customs enforcement to buy and operate its own fleet of airplanes to carry out mass deportations. The plan ties directly to U.S. President Donald Trump's promise to deport 1 million undocumented immigrants per year if he returns to the White House. Remember, ICE has relied on charter flights for years, typically leasing 8 to 14 planes at a time to deport about 15,000 people each month. Former officials reportedly believe that if ICE owned its own planes, the agency could potentially double deportations to more than 30,000 each month. Reports suggest that internal data show that during his first 6 months, ICE deported between 100,000 and 150,000 people, including voluntary departures. A major obstacle is cost. Experts estimate commercial airliners range from $80 to $400 million each, depending on the aircraft. That means purchasing 30 planes, the number needed to meet Trump's deportation target, could cost between $2.4 and $12 billion. At present, charter companies maintain planes and ensure they comply with federal aviation safety and security regulations. But if ICE operates its own airline, the agency would need to hire pilots, medics, and security while managing full maintenance. The Trump administration's big, beautiful bill allocates $30 billion specifically for ICE deportation operations. In total, that sweeping law boosts ICE's budget to more than $75 billion, up from $9.5 billion annually. By July this year, ICE had already chartered over 1,000 flights, each costing about $25,000 per flight hour, as per reports. However, critics have warned that running a federal deportation airline could add enormous costs, even as detention centers face severe overcrowding.
Federal agencies are seeking to acquire their own fleet of aircraft, potentially doubling monthly deportation capacity from 15,000 to 30,000 individuals. The massive financial investment required, potentially billions of dollars, for aircraft alone, demonstrates the administration's commitment to expanding enforcement capabilities beyond anything previously attempted. These expanded operations have already begun affecting communities across the country. In one recent incident near an elementary school, federal agents detained an undocumented parent during morning drop-off, traumatizing children who witnessed the arrest on their way to school.
Neighbors watch and record as ICE and ATF agents take a man in a construction safety vest into custody.
What's right now? Citation!
It happened Wednesday, 2 blocks from Parkdale Elementary School in Encinitas during morning drop-off.
The crossing guard that stands here was told to divert children around this
melee that was happening.
Jessie Kahn says she was on her way to work when she stopped to see what was going on.
This was happening to a family. It was just devastating.
ICE says the undocumented man from Guatemala has a deportation order from 2017. They also say his alleged spouse arrived to the scene with a young child. That's when Kahn says she stepped in.
I took her child so that she could be the best wife and parent that she could be.
The crossing guard had to divert students around the scene, while parents scrambled to shield their children from the disturbing sight. The human impact of these enforcement actions extends far beyond those directly detained. In another case, concerned citizens and legal advocates have begun attempting to intervene during arrests, attempting to offer legal assistance to T. Ho's being detained.
What y'all doing?
It's against state law to walk on the highway.
Oh, I'm a lawyer, but I'm their lawyer now, so I'm gonna have a conversation.
Actually,
Get back,
you're not
stay
their
back.
lawyer. You're not their lawyer.
You guys have representation?
Stay back.
We're not having.
You got it?
You're in danger standing here in front of.
I'm not in danger standing in here any more than you are. Do you guys want a lawyer?
We're conducting official business, sir. You're not.
I don't care. Do you guys want a lawyer? No? You? You want a lawyer? You want a lawyer? Okay.
If you're gonna be an immigration lawyer, help us speak Spanish.
I mean, I can speak a little Spanish, not enough.
Watch your back.
You guys sure you don't want an attorney? Right now. You sure? You sure you don't want a lawyer?
These confrontations highlight the growing tension between enforcement priorities and community concerns about due process and humanitarian considerations. The revocation of the sensitive locations policy represents a significant shift in how immigration enforcement operates. Under previous administrations, there was at least a theoretical recognition that certain places should be off-limits to immigration agents, except in extreme circumstances. With those protections removed, immigrant communities now face the prospect that nowhere is truly safe from enforcement actions. This policy change has profound implications for public health and safety. When immigrants fear that seeking medical care could result in detention or deportation, they're less likely to visit hospitals or clinics. This doesn't just affect immigrant families, it affects entire communities, as untreated illnesses can spread and emergency rooms become overwhelmed with patients who delayed seeking care. The educational implications are equally concerning. If schools are no longer protected locations, immigrant parents may keep their children home rather than risk exposure to immigration enforcement. This could lead to increased truancy rates and long-term educational disadvantages for children who are often U.S. citizens or legal residents themselves. Rosa Maria's case also highlights the particular vulnerabilities faced by children with disabilities in the immigration system. The complex medical needs of children like Rosa Maria require consistent care from familiar healthcare providers who understand their conditions. When these children are detained or separated from their families, their health can deteriorate rapidly. The psychological trauma associated with detention and family separation can be particularly severe for children with developmental disabilities who may not understand why they're being separated from their parents or caregivers. The long-term effects of such trauma can include anxiety, depression, and regression in developmental progress. Looking at Rosa Maria's case through the lens of current policy changes raises troubling questions about what might happen to children in similar situations today. With the sensitive locations policy revoked, there would be even fewer protections for vulnerable individuals seeking medical care. The already thin, humanitarian considerations that existed in 2017 have been further eroded. The case also demonstrates the importance of accurate information in public discourse about immigration. The recent mischaracterization of Rosa Maria's detention as an ICE operation rather than a Border Patrol action might seem like a minor detail, but it reflects broader challenges in understanding the complex web of agencies and policies that govern immigration enforcement. When we get the facts wrong, we risk undermining legitimate criticisms of immigration policies and making it easier for officials to dismiss concerns as misinformed. Rosa Maria's case is powerful enough on its own merits. It doesn't need to be embellished or mischaracterized to make its point about the human cost of rigid enforcement policies. The story of Rosa Maria Hernandez serves as a stark reminder that immigration policy isn't just about abstract legal principles or border security statistics. It's about real people, including vulnerable children with disabilities, who find themselves caught in a system that often seems designed more to punish than to protect. As we move forward into an era of potentially expanded immigration enforcement, Rosa Maria's case should serve as a cautionary tale about the importance of maintaining humanitarian protections, especially for children and other vulnerable populations. Her story reminds us that behind every immigration case is a human being with hopes, fears, and the fundamental right to be treated with dignity and compassion. The fact that Rosa Maria's story continues to resonate years later speaks to its enduring relevance. It represents not just one family's ordeal, but the experiences of countless others who have been caught between their need for safety, medical care, or simply a better life, and an immigration system that often seems incapable of distinguishing between genuine threats and vulnerable individuals in need of help. Whether we're talking about ICE or Border Patrol, whether we're discussing policies from 2017 or 2025, the fundamental question remains the same. What kind of country do we want to be? Rosa Maria Hernandez's case challenges us to answer that question not with abstract principles, but with concrete actions that reflect our values and our humanity.